First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to monthly C Tribe Speaker Series. If you don't know me, I'm the Ram. I'm going to be host and moderator for today's session. The topic we are picking for Jan 2025 is India Contech 2025. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And where India fits in the global context when it comes to Contech, right? Thanks. As everyone knows, the construction tech in India is like a kind of evolving rapidly. We are seeing a new startup minting almost every second week at this point, and there's a lot of buzzwords within the industry: AI, prefab, LLMs. So this is going to be kind of interesting times, and we definitely want to get a great perspective from the one of the industry leader, Aditya Thakur. I'm going to introduce more next few minutes um, about how the startup founders and the customers gonna should navigate 2025 with so much noise around in the ecosystem. Let me introduce the speaker for Jan 2025 series. Once again, Aditya, thank you so much for joining us. I can say so many words, but I will try to be put in very few words. Like he's a industry, one of the industry leading voice. He's a innovation champion, great track record in the context space, and now a venture partner, entrepreneur, multiple hats. Work had a great work experience working in West and India. Aditya, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, this is the time.
Sure. So I think, first of all, thank you everyone for joining. And I think Ram is being too kind. I don't pretend to think that I'm a leading voice. I think I've just been lucky to be part of an experience in maybe one of the first acquisitions of construction tech, which has given me some perspective on, what construction tech is like, what is the difficulties, especially in the US context. So I was in PlanGrid, which got acquired by Autodesk, and now I'm in India and still trying to like honestly learning more about the Indian landscape, Indian context, and mostly it's through the people that I have met within the space that has given me like some insight. So I would say I have this my thoughts and my opinions. These by no means are like definitive or leading voice. It's just what I have experienced so far.
Um, Thank you so much, Aditya. Again, we want to make it very interactive, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. We'll definitely try to touch base those questions at the end of the discussion. Um, I think jumping into you're the one of very few whose exposure and experience the first hand on the Western ecosystem, like being in the SF Silicon Valley, then you move to India and building your own ecosystem here. I think one of the architect of ecosystem at this point. So let's begin with the big picture. Okay, what do you see the most promising opportunities when it comes to Indian context in 2025? Considering the sector is rapidly evolving. Mm.
Sure. So I would say that first, I think what I'm slowly realizing is like the Indian ecosystem is very, very different from the American ecosystem because like the way things are structured in America is different. The cost pressures are different in Western countries versus Indian countries. So I think it'd be very hard to say that something that has worked in the West will work exactly as we think it should work in India. So I think there are nuances and there are fragmentations which are different. In terms of opportunities that in India, right? Like there are two broad categories of companies that I have seen in India. One is they're built in India for India, and then the second category is built in India for rest of the world. So our Formwork Labs company, right, which Sonar Labs, which just got selected within Formwork Labs, like they are basically building for globally and targeting the US. And what they are trying to do is an interesting space that I think will definitely grow is very focused vertical AI solutions that are trying to solve a very very unique problem in the industry. So what they're trying to do is like really solve the material logistics problem in the US. So for companies which are in India, which are targeting US, I would definitely say that vertical AI, robotics, automation, materials are going to be like more companies that we see coming in. Um, when you flip over to companies in India for India, I think the dynamics change slightly because what at least I've seen, right? Like I think software is much harder to do in India, just generally. And I know this not just from like Indian startups, but when Autodesk was trying to sell software in India, like the numbers, the monthly and yearly numbers vary largely. So I think definitely think software is kind of harder. And I think the second variation that I've seen in India is like customers would definitely prefer an all-in-one solution because they want to kind of get a lot of value and they're very value conscious. So keeping that in mind, like I think in India, the opportunities I see is, if you can leverage AI to kind of bring together disparate processes for small and medium companies, which don't have to spend a lot, but they get a lot of value. Like I think that's definitely one area. Second, like, with companies like Zetwork and Off Business, marketplaces within the construction ecosystem, I think there is still a lot of space to come up with specific niches. So one company, which is kind of in India, but they're doing it for the US, it's another portfolio company called MacBook. So they source materials from India, but they're supplying to, general contractors and contractors in the US. So I would say like that is second play. The third, like, some of the successful companies that I've seen in India, which are growing is, Brick and Bolt comes to mind, which is trying to build like a end-to-end construction platform for, the tier one cities, but the tier three buyer who is usually neglected. So I would say those are, opportunities that I would say it's worth kind of digging into for India.
Thank you, Aditya. I think you brought a very interesting element, right? Building uh, in India for India versus for global. And I think we always hear from the founders all the time, like when is the right time? At what time you need to decide whether you need to focus on one geography or you need to have a kind of a go-to-market strategy where you need to rapidly enter into different geographies. When I say geography, I wouldn't just say that India versus global, but also like tier one, tier two. So, from your experience working with different startups, what is your advice, like defining these geography and markets? Because everything
I
is very unique in itself, right?
Yeah, I think there are some natural companies that come to mind. So, for example, right, like if you're software, like I met a VC recently in Pune, right? Like he basically tells all of his portfolio software companies that if you're building software and it's SaaS, go US, go West, because the market is mature. Like like the way he defined it was the time you spend getting revenue in India for software versus the time you spend the revenue that you get is like there's a 10x difference. So if you spend 6 months getting X revenue in India, if you spend the 6 months getting revenue in the US, it's potentially going to be like 10x the revenue. So I definitely, I think if it's software, I would highly recommend if it's a SaaS application, go West if you can, if your solution kind of easily navigates to West. The other companies, right? Like if you're building like a marketplace or those tend to be more local, as in you're building a marketplace for India in India. And then I think that there's a third category where, like I said, MacBook, right? Like they're trying to create use India as a source for global supplies. So that could be a third. So I don't think it's a very easy answer to say that, when do you flip? It just depends on what kind of business you are. Like, there are two types, right? Like if you're building software, you can build in India and sell everywhere. If you're building a marketplace, can you source from India and then supply it to customers outside of India, like Middle East and then US? But then if you're doing something like, Brick and Bolt, right, that they're building a platform for tier three in India, those are much more harder to take to the West. So it really depends on what you're trying to build.
Gotcha. Interesting. It makes sense. So, jumping into more interesting things happening right now. I mean, almost everyone, if you open a news, you see like a deep seek, LLMs, Chinese versus American. Should India build its own LLM? Um, but just so LLMs definitely opened a kind of a wave on vertical AI, right? So there's a lot of opportunities before, which was very difficult to do. using application layers on top of LLMs, right? So how do you see leveraging this LLM? Um, and top of it, do you have any, like, how VCs are evaluating when they are evaluating that startup? They also evaluate the tech stack at the end of the day. So how deep they go on, like, they have any preferences on what kind of LLMs the founders are using, or what is the mode when it comes to it? Mm,
Yeah, I think one thing to also sort of recognize that like even VCs and any VCs, like, they're also everyone's learning about AI. Like I feel like the only true experts on AI are the people building AI, and everyone else is trying to come up with their own kind of opinions and understanding of AI. Like I tell you one thing that has changed very recently, right? Like before DeepSeek, the thinking was that if you're not building ground up LLMs, like your own tech, hiring extremely expensive engineers and building core tech, then you're not a true AI company and you're not investable because the AI is just a wrapper, like anyone can do it. And I think what has changed with DeepSeek, and it's very, very recent, is that maybe if the AI or LLMs are going to a route where they're going to be commoditized, right? Like DeepSeek essentially commoditized AIs, then what actually matters is what you do with the AI on top of it. So the new emerging thinking, and this might be more like maybe me right now talking based on like whatever I've seen is like I think now AI is commoditized. So what matters is how can you leverage AI to create more tailored user experiences for your solution that you're building? And then the trick would be how do you get distribution? Because one of the things about construction industry, which is kind of unique compared to others, it's distribution is the hardest. Like the average sales cycle for converting a US customer from like a pilot stage to a paid stage, even for the best of starters that I've seen, is can go anywhere between 6 months to 18 months. And I'm including companies like Autodesk and Planet into the same bucket, right? Like it does take long. So distribution is definitely hard. And I think hopefully now, if AI is being commoditized, startups can build very tailor-made custom solutions which are more flexible and meet where the users are. So I feel like now design and user interface service will matter a lot more. It really would not matter. I think 6 months back the question was which LLM are you using? Are you building your ground on? And people would just make up answers like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm building LLMs, and you look at their team, they have a bunch of interns who have just graduated. So I think people were like, you know, trying to figure out what to do. But now it'll be like, okay, it doesn't really matter what AI you're using, how you're using it, and what kind of workflow or use case are you trying to solve for.
makes sense, 100%. Honestly, I mean, people always, I see, like, they tailor their LLMs based upon, it's always a custom using 50% open AI, 50% Meta. So there's a combination, and there's no one perfect way. It depends upon what you want to build and what is the pain point you want to solve. But it also bringing a very sharp divide. Following up question is like a east versus west, a geopolitical fault line. Um, how do you see, like, do you ask your startups, whether it's as part of the due diligence or your existing portfolio, like how they are insulating themselves while building the startup? So make sure that, for example, let's take the MacBook in this case. I think I know the founder is a great guy. That Trump is going to say that I'm going to put a 10% tariff on any material that will be procured from India going forward. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So for founders who want to expand in West or who want to enter into West, how to overcome this uncertainty? Mm, mm.
Um, I wish I had a good answer, and I would bet to to challenge any person in the VC world who has a very accurate answer for it. Like for example of MacBook, right? I think they just have to figure out because when tariffs came, even in China, for example, there were exceptions made. There were not all products were tariffed at the same rate. So I think MacBook will just have to play it as it goes, hedge their bets, like maybe not just target US, but go to Middle East and like have a hedge in terms of not being overly focused on on one market, like that would be like a more obvious thing that I would recommend. Again, I like so brick and mortar and even other VCs in construction tech, like when no one's investing big checks at a later stage company. Like most of these, like Zakua, brick and mortar, fundamental, like all are smaller stage. At that time, it does have an implication, but the implication is not huge because you're kind of betting that, okay, do you believe in this idea? Do you think that this will grow? And then can you provide the conditions for founders to figure it out? So I would say, like, I think, procurement companies definitely are maybe scrambling and hopefully they're thinking about which other markets they can open up because of the tariffs. I think for software, it should not matter. Services, it should not matter. Robotics, potentially, if you're trying to export a robotics sort of product, then I think it might definitely matter. Again, I would say like no one. It's such a dynamic situation. Like every day, the situation is changing based on what the White House says. So I don't think anyone has like a or should have a good answer to that.
100%. And no matter how much you plan, right now there's a lot of disruption. So it's like you need to keep evolving yourself. Um, Big themes, right? So back in 2024 there was a lot of no, the VC industry right now is like a little down, like it's very tough to raise money capital. Now we entering 2025, there are, I have follow-up questions for sure. The first question is like, what is the sentiment looks like for VCs in 2025? Do you, is it going to be more conservative or like more aggressive or somewhere in between? Both Western and domestic VCs, considering you're in it.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I only have visibility more into the like the AEC ecosystem and like some fellow VCs, very big ones and popular ones like Fundamental and Sequoia. Like I do see, like when I talk to other folks within the industry, within the VCs, like everyone's in a good shape to like their new funds are being raised, right? AEC tech generally has not had that much investments in the past. So if you look historically, the overall VC dollars are increasing, right? I think the only thing I would say is like it might be changing, which is probably true for a lot of VCs. Like I think uh, you kind of evaluate a company on three areas, right? Like what is the team? Like how good is the team? Do they have technology and is there traction? And I think when there is a lot of money, traction might be not, looked at very, very deeply. But I think when there is, scarcity or, a downturn, as you say, I think traction matters. But I do think like if companies have the right team, the right technology, and most importantly, traction, I think there's always, VC money available to raise for those kind of companies.
Gotcha. When you say traction, what are the metrics you're looking? I mean, at least at brick and mortars, is are there any hard metrics like 1 million or something? Mm,
No, I think I would say like there are some obvious metrics that even if you're not a VC, right? Like you're looking at a growth of a company, right? Is revenue? What is the revenue growth month on month, quarter on quarter? If you're in a in a play where revenue is not that important, but you're going for users, then you're looking at like what is the usage growth month on month, quarter on quarter? What is your active engagement? What is your acquisition cost of customers, what is lifetime value. So I don't think there are hard metrics, but generally they tend to be around either revenue or usage if you're a software. And if you're in robotics, it gets slightly tricky, but that again, revenue is a good metric there, or otherwise, like if we have companies in our portfolio where we track that how much of you know uh, printing is being done through the site robotics, for example. Like, is that number increasing and compounding? The revenue might be lagging, usage might be lagging, but is the device being used a lot? So I would say those three would be the general metrics.
Thank you. That really helps a lot of founders who are in the call. Um, Before I jump into more insights on the VC investment environment, I just want to take a moment to understand what are brick and mortar plan for India in long run and also for 2025 near term. Mm.
I
Also,
mean, I would say,
before you
yeah,
jump,
go ahead.
maybe few people doesn't know how big is brick and mortars. What is your fund size? Maybe just touch basing those things also helps.
Sure, I can give an intro of brick and mortar. So brick and mortar is probably maybe one of the older VC firms within the space. It was started by Darren Bechtel. So he comes from the Bechtel family. His brother runs the Bechtel Corporation, which is a pretty large general contractor which has projects everywhere in the world. Like the Bechtel Corporation does about 18 to 20 billion dollars of construction every year. So it's part of the same kind of family. Darren started investing through using his own personal funds, so that we call Fund Zero, and then it has raised basically two funds. Usually, the fund size is anywhere between 120 to 150 million dollars, and the check size typically ranges anywhere between 1.5 million dollars to, and it can go up to $5 million. Um, Brick and mortar is usually not the earliest or the first check in the startup, so that's why we have this incubation program called Formwork Labs, where earlier companies can apply. So Sonar Labs, again, one of the examples that went through it. So that is our early incubator, but usually, we tend to be, late stage or large seed, or if not Series A. An investment we made in a company called Planera last year. So that was a Series A, and then we kind of co-led the round. In terms of brick and mortar's plan for India, right? Like I think the way it has happened, right, for brick and mortar is more organically, in the sense that a lot of startups, a lot of founders started reaching out to brick and mortar from India, and it's kind of hard to. You need to be close to the geography or visit frequently to kind of build up a thesis. So that's why, that's where I come in and I'm trying to help build, you know, the India thesis, like what actually works in India, and definitely I think everyone now, especially in the West, is looking at India in a very different way. Like it's becoming the GCC capital of the world. A lot of companies are moving to India. Reliance announced the world's largest data center, which is going to be 1 gigawatt that Reliance is building. So there are a lot of eyes in India, and I think the goal for brick and mortar is mostly to really build a thesis of which investments to make, where can brick and mortar provide value more than just the money, and then scale that out. So I would say like it's still in the evolution phase. And I think there have been like other VC, like I think one VC firm that I really admire is like Fundamental. I think they've been early, and Shubh is an amazing, like if you've not listened to his podcast, I would highly recommend you tune in. Like I listen to his podcast pretty actively. But like they have, invested in infra market and brick and board, and like they have been investing a lot initially. But I think like fundamental is there now. Zakua is coming in, brick and mortar is coming in. So there is more eyes on the India market, and I think you know we are all fairly collaborative when it comes to investing. So which we'll see hopefully more thesis being built out. There's two questions, Ram. Should I answer those
Yeah,
questions?
100%.
So, Naman, I'll answer yours quickly. It's called Practical Nerds Podcast. It should be on Spotify podcast, and Patrick and Shub both post a lot. So I think I really enjoy them. I listen to
I
them.
think
Uh,
Patrick shared it on LinkedIn. I think that's the one, right?
Yes.
From
Yeah,
VC.
that's the
Yes.
one. And they have
I,
Spotify and everywhere. So it's pretty good. Like I think an interesting thesis, right? Which I think, Shub, especially, and Patrick have been talking about now, Axel is talking about, especially for India. And I think not just India, but more globally, is this idea of tech-enabled services. So the idea is that when AI gets commoditized, and if software is cheap, like people are already you know, kind of fed up of buying more software. Like even if you look at ourselves personally, right? Like I'm sure like we have Prime, we have Netflix, like we have so many subscriptions, and compound that 10 times, it's getting to a point where it's kind of very hard to create the distribution. And I think, Shub and Patrick and Fundamental and Axel have started talking about this idea of like, outcome as a service or a tech-enabled service where companies will not just buy software, they'll buy an outcome that you are providing. And I do see that that is one area where there is more consensus that's building up, that it really doesn't matter if you're in, I think especially in India it'll matter more, but even in US and Europe, like what is the outcome you're creating? So even Brick and Mortar invested in two companies. One of them is called Join Earnest. It's a Florida-based company, and the guy basically decided that he wanted some mechanical contractor for his house he couldn't find someone, and he said he built a company, and now he built like a whole platform where he goes and executes jobs, but he's building software for execution of his own jobs, and then basically his margin goes up. There's another portfolio company called Curry within Brick and Mortar, which is again they're trying to solve the logistics and supply chain of construction. So they're not just building the software; they're basically helping move material as well. So one area I definitely think is, this idea of tech-enabled contracting or outcome-based technologies or services will be a big focus area for construction tech overall.
Yeah, we also seeing that more for a robotic startups also. Like, okay, it's very tough to sell a robot with spray paint. How about I become a contractor using these robots, kind of a thing. Um, yeah, that's a great insight. Thank you so much, Aditya. Just one more follow-up question on the brick and mortars, and I will stop asking on brick and mortars, go for product teams. Um, do you have any kind of a quota, like, or a ratio, like you want to invest here? Okay, 80% of US based startups, 20% India. What is the lay? How you want to diversifying your portfolio? I mean, I'm sure you can only write a limited checks at the end of the day, and you also need
Sure.
to pay follow-up investments in existing companies. Mm.
So I think, and other VCs might have different ways that they split it. I think for brick and mortar, India is still new, right? And I think the way we're thinking about it is, what is the best deal for the fund versus the best deal geographically? Like, we don't have like a India-based fund right now. And I think we are investing in European startups, we're evaluating Asian startups, Indian startups. So it'll just come down to what is the best use of the funds that brick and mortar has raised. And I think it's a good strategy to have, because at the end of the day, right, like we see that also, like they have their customers, so we have our customers, which are our LPs who are strategics who invest in brick and mortar, and they're expecting a return. So it's kind of, at least for brick and mortar, it's more of like, what is the best deal that we can do based on the fund. So there's no allocation. So it could be, right, it could be like there'd be 5 investments in India just because those technologies and there's a thesis built out, and we believe that irrespective of it being an Indian startup, what that company is doing is going to succeed. So at least for brick and mortar, there's no split on like how much money allocation needs to be there.
Gotcha. Makes sense, 100%. I mean, I think that's a kind of a becoming a trend for most of other VC funds we are saying. Thank you so much. We spoke a little bit about the business model, outcome as a um, kind of a guarantee almost. Then we also touched base a little bit on the fundraising, on investments. We also touched base like what should be a go-to market, or like a whether you should build for global or whether you build for India. Um, Going back to I mean, yeah, we touched base a little on the major themes, right? Obviously, vertical AI that you are seeing. Um, how you put themes from the lens of pain points? Like, what are the big pain points you are listening from your LPs or customers through your research? Um, that there's a lot of willingness to pay at the end of the day. Mm.
So I would remove so like a lot of customers or LPs or potential LPs I have met, world over, and especially in India, they have a lot of pain points, but they don't want to pay for all the pain points. So I think we should remove the willingness to pay and pain points separately, because it's not always that if you have a pain point, people are willing to pay for it. I think themes, right? Like if I talk about like Europe, like the deal flow that we see, right? That's an early indicator of what are the themes that are happening. So especially in Europe, sustainability, I think they've already always been ahead, and we're seeing sort of more and more companies come through. So sustainability definitely will be a field that grows. I think US will always be a laggard, but sustainability is a theme. I think on the US side, right, like project management as a area is, I would say, fairly saturated. There are enough tools there. So I think now the focus is on more specific workflows, such as, can we do something in estimating? Can we do something in early design? Right? Like one of our portfolio companies is Hypar, which is trying to do like space planning and conceptual design. So I think that is where there is appetite. And the other big thing that's happening is like fintech for construction. So how do you build like there are a lot of deal flow companies coming around which are trying to use like some are using blockchain to figure out how do you do contract management, invoice management, how do you push money around between contractors and subcontractors. So I think that would be the pain points that are resonating. The other macro thing which is happening, slowly and it'll sort of gradually increases, like especially in the West, both Europe and US, the labor force is definitely changing, right? Like I think it's only a matter of time where a pretty significant portion of people retire, and there is no talent that is coming in to fill that gap. So that creates an opportunity itself, right? That is a pain that everyone's focusing. So I think the broader themes, one area that I'm definitely passionate about is like modular construction. I feel like something's going to happen there. So I think modular, prefab, robotics, softwares which basically eliminate data silos. Like I think those will generally will grow. And I think India is slightly different. I think India is still in its early journey. There's a lot of competition. I do think like the successes that at least I've seen with Zetwork and off business, like marketplaces are making it easier to procure. I think there's a lot of appetite. Like Axel Post put this thing out around what are their like the latest investments that they're going to do with their latest fund. They're talking about for tier 2, tier 3 city solutions for them, IoT solutions for them, anything that has a manufacturing bend, especially built in India for global. So I think those are the themes emerging, especially within India.
Yeah. So within Contech, we see a kind of a sharp division, like asset light startups, asset heavy, like a prefab modeler. Um, we have few founders within our community. We are like a asset heavy in nature, and I guess they struggle more compared to the software AI kind of a startup. So, uh, what are some inputs, some recommendations, some suggestions you see give, and what is a kind of a take from VCs when they hear a pitch from asset heavy kind of a startups? Hmm.
So I know there are a few of them in this call too, and I've spoken to them. So I think um, every VC, right, every VC firm has kind of their strategy. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that an idea is not worth building. Like I don't think the VC structure should dictate whether to pursue some idea. I think it should be more around like, is that problem worth solving? Is it solvable? And is there traction? So I think for asset heavy businesses, which come through a deal flow, right? Like modular 3D printing, prefab. I think for brick and mortar, it'll boil down to, traction. Like how much traction do you have? If you're able to prove out traction, irrespective of the business model, like I would bet that a lot of VCs, irrespective of the strategy, will be interested in at least thinking about it. There are some VCs who do more into asset heavy businesses. Their fund structure is different. They exclusively go for that. So like the only pointer I would have is like I think if a VC says we're not going to invest in you, it doesn't mean you should change your entire business model for that VC. It just means that it's not doesn't fit within the thesis of that VC. If you're able to solve a problem, you can figure out traction, technology, team. It's a business worth building, and I think you will find the right investor to help you along in your journey.
Thank you so much, Aditya. I think it's a great comments. I guess I'm gonna definitely gonna edit this part and put in YouTube for sure. So doubling down on the just let's focus some time on monetization and pricing, right? um I think one of if there is a almost very diversity when it comes to what a US customer wants or what Indian customers want across the world. But if there is something very common when it comes to construction, no matter which part of the world, is like they all are very sensitive to money they want to willing to pay for a product, like very price sensitive market, right?
Yeah.
Within that, like how do you like, because when it comes to vertical AI, which is a kind of a trend right now, some of your pricing really depends upon the LLMs, right? You you take money from the customer, but you also need to pay to the LLMs, kind of a deal. So how in this kind of complex, like how you're recommending guiding the startups, or what are some things you are seeing which feels like a unique business model? Mm.
So, like pricing, again, like I think I would say the overarching thesis on pricing, and at least I've seen it from, Autodesk side and Planet and some other, you know, software companies, is it is slowly going to move towards the utility or the usage. It's not going to be a drastic change, but like Autodesk has this pricing called as flex pricing, which is like it's all the suite of products, and you kind of pay tokens for the products that you use. I mean, obviously, Autodesk has a lot of suite of products that exist, but I
Mhm.
do believe that, I think if you can think about, right, like this idea of outcome based technologies, right? It kind of pricing also stems from that. Like, what is the outcome that you provide? What is the savings that you can provide? And then basically figuring out how to price it appropriately. Because like at the end, right, like the customer will not care if this as a startup you have to go pay OpenAI or whoever or Claude that much money. I think it's basically comes down to like what value are you creating for them, and then how much are they willing to pay. And on the flip side, I'd also say that like what DeepSeek has proven, and it's still very new, but you don't have to spend a lot on AI also, right? Like now, I think I think there'll be a mindset shift that you don't really need to build AI solutions anymore. You just have to be smart enough to figure out which AI solution to use, and then basically create a very, very good user experience and meet the customer where they are to build that. So my like I again I don't think I can give you like a definite pointer of how to think about pricing, but the overarching theme is like think about the outcome you're creating for the end customer. What are they already used to paying? And then are you
Mhm.
creating value to take that money? Like there's a concept that someone had told me, right? Like it is easy to redirect money than create new money. What I mean is like if a customer is in their workflow, right, they are paying X amount of dollars to someone or to some solution already, and you come up with a better solution or a different solution, it's easier to divert that money and be like, I'm already paying for
Mhm.
that. I might as well pay for this. I think the harder piece is if you've come up with something new, which is an additional, which they didn't think about, then it's kind of harder to figure out the pricing and charge the customers for it.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Acha. That's very valuable insights. I do have a lot of questions. We keep talking because it's so interesting. But I just want to touch base on some of the questions in the comments. I also feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask something. One of the first question is like, if you're a bootstrapped startup, like at what stage you need to, at what is the right time to build a sales team from investors' perspective? I mean, we all hear like sometimes we see this LinkedIn post like your first 100 sales you need to founder should do by themselves. So many things. So what are your thoughts on that part? Mm,
Sure.
mm,
I mean, as you said, right, Ram, like I wear multiple hats. I also run a company. I'm also a venture partner. I think, my uh, view is changed, and I think I do believe that the first 20 to 30 customers, they should be founder-led sales very, very strongly. Because I
mm,
think what happens is if you go and hire a sales team too early, you kind of are anchoring on the sales teams to figure out how to position your product, how you pitch your product. Because also what happens is as a founder, right, like you will learn a lot talking to your customers again and again and again, and you'll figure out either something that you need to change in your pricing model, product model, feature model. And I think that will build kind of your expertise. If you guys have not read this book, it's a book called "The Hard Things About Hard Things" by Ben Horowitz. Like I'm rereading it, and I feel like everything he says in that book is very very apt, right? Like from a hiring, just coming back to sales team. Like I think even if you're hiring a sales team, right? Sometimes what founders and entrepreneurs do the mistake is they kind of hire for beyond. They'll hire an executive or someone senior imagining a future of 5 years. And what Ben Horowitz in his book says is hire for what you need for the next 18 months. Because that is who you need. And it's very hard to get someone who you need after 5 years to do the job you need now, and vice versa. So for sales, I highly recommend that first 20-25 customers should be founders led. And then I think you figure out the system and layer in the sales team. And it's also
I
more cost effective. It's also more cost effective. Like salespeople, especially if you're selling in the US, just to hire and like figure out the structure, it's a pretty expensive proposition.
100%. I mean, I can't agree more, right? So, I mean, the other thing, beautiful things is like a founder-led sales. One, at very early stage, your product gonna fall short no matter what, right? There's something it's missing, some bug, some error, some gap. But founder building relationship with the customer is more forgiving versus salesperson, right? Because when a founder does a sales, he builds a kind of a partnership with the customer. When a sales guy does, it's more transactional in nature, and they are very unforgiving when it's a transactional. So, and also listening to the feedback. Um, from my experience, when sales people do sales, they don't filter the feedback to the product team in a right way, seeing the what are the trends they are listening from the customers so that they build the right futures. While the founder has that opportunity, but definitely it's 100%. Any founder who is building a startup right now or planning to launch one, um, be that person who do the sales, be that person who do the customer success for all your startup, for all your customers at early stage. There's another interesting question from Chaitanya. What are the top three areas you see globally that are underserved and that is overcrowded? I mean, I could say overcrowded AI for sure, but yeah. Um,
So I will answer the second question first from Chaitanya. Like, what is the
uh-huh.
overcrowded space? So definitely, especially I would say the West. When I say West, I say Europe and the US. Like project management solutions, document management solutions. It is fairly crowded, right? Like I think if you have not started 5-6 years back, if you're thinking about starting a project management solution company now, I would say that is overcrowded. Um, the other thing, right, like within the project management space, like there were solutions that were coming up around safety, asset management, quality, like specific workflows. Again, if you see the large players like Procore and Autodesk, Fieldwire and others, like again, look at them. It is a crowded space. Definitely, it's going to be hard for you to figure out kind of your moat, and mainly the distribution is going to be the biggest challenge because customers already have something that they're using. Um, Underserved in the context space, I think the, the other thing to remember about construction tech, right? It's very different than other industries. I'll tell you how. Like sometimes when we think about construction, like we should think about Contech as software, robotics, materials, and everything. Because if you're doing $100 million project, only 2% spend on an average goes on technology, right? Of $100 million spend. And the thing is, like, you have to think about is like a lot of people are targeting those 2%. And the 2% includes companies like Microsoft who provide like email exchanges, Azure, your laptops, everything is included. And then the pie is like, 1.5% for everything else. So if you're building software and if you're going after that, 2.5, either figure out is there something else that you can add to increase that 2.5 will be a new spend, or very, very core technologies, very specific use case, either in the design phase, procurement phase, logistics phase. Like, don't go where the crowd is. The other thing to think about is the rest of the 98%, right? Like robotics will fit into that, materials will fit into that, prefab modular fit into that. So I think, it's also important to keep in mind that construction is different inherently based on like where the money is. The software pie, like as much as construction is, it's fairly small. So if you're building a software company, go dig deep and build something very unique, and then I think you will have a lot of success versus trying to just build a solution and there's a lot of crowd there. It's going to be hard for you to gain distribution.
Thank you so much, Aditya. I think no contact discussion finishes, or I mean, I wouldn't use finish, we still have time. Wouldn't there should be always a some discussion on SMBs, right? Small and medium businesses. Be it in US or be it in India. I think it's very hard to crack. And there's a lot of this kind of a point I hear again and again from the Indian founders. Hey, my startup's in India, so the Procore auditors cannot sell to the SMBs because of pricing in nature. But if I'm an
Mhm.
Indian guy who building a PM SAW solution, it's going to be dead cheap because it's a kind of a dollars to rupees conversion. I can easily sell to SMB in US. Help me to launch. So I'm sure you heard at some point this kind of a discussion. So what's your take on that thing? Is it easy for to crack SMBs for Indian startups? Hmm.
I would say, like I said in the first point, like distribution is hard no matter who you are. Like I'm including even companies like Autodesk and Procore, right? Like the amount of see the thing about one of the nuance about construction tech is that like self-service software very rarely works, right? Like it's not like a Slack that people will download, start using it, or like Chat GPT, DeepSeek, you just download. I think even if you build like a ridiculously simple solution, there is a decent amount of hand holding, customer success, implementation that happens. So I think while like, there are examples of companies that, that have leveraged the cost structure of India to an advantage to build the technology, which I think I highly recommend, right? Like that should be your default. I think getting to SMBs, like you just have to, it's a slow process. It's very organic. Hiring sales folks in US is expensive. So distribution is always going to be a challenge. But the other answer, Ram, to your question, right? Like I do believe, right? Like project management and as Indian companies mature, people are going to need more software. And I think there is a company to be built which does project management well in India, which kind of, Zoho started with that, right? Like Zoho built for India first, did really well, went after the SMBs, and now they're giving SAPs and the Microsofts of the world a pretty tough fight globally. So I do believe there is a space for a good software solution for India. You just have to figure out like pricing is going to be a challenge, scaling is going to be a challenge, but the companies that figures that out, I think there's a space to build a really good company there.
Um, so there's a question on incumbents, right? So we spoke a lot like building for India to global or for India. I mean, in both scenarios, but there's also a question like why global companies failing? I mean, I know there's Autodesk you people use, but still it's not like a highly used within Indian context. Like why global companies are unable to have a successful launch in India? Procore, like for example, Procore. Hmm.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of like more fairly obvious answers. Like one is the pricing that for project management solutions that these companies charge in the US, that price is just it's just not sustainable or workable in India. So I think inherently pricing acts against some of these global players to come in. The second is even for companies like Autodesk and Procore, right? Like where you start building the product, you're kind of building initially for that market condition. Like I'll tell you a simple example. Like Issues is a tool like I was working on in Autodesk. It is called Issues, and everything we built in the product was issued. But in UK, it's called Snags. And for the longest time, people didn't use issues and orders because they're like it's not it doesn't do snacks. So even subtle, semantic nuances exist between country to country. So while I think Procore and US are doing extremely well in the US, I think even in Europe, they've not been, they're still trying to figure out how to penetrate that. So I think when you translate that to India, like the whole dynamic of the industry is very different. Like in US, it's very segmented that you have the architect, the design firm, the GC, the subcontractor. Like here you have developers, here you have big builders who have a lot of things integrated. And they are the ones who are paying. So when you take a Procore, the solution doesn't exactly scale because They want more comprehensive suite because they are developers and builders and they integrate a lot. So I think the simple answer is like I think it's just not made for the local geo or local dynamics. And the biggest barrier is pricing because what they charge in the US, it just does not translate well in India.
That 100% makes sense. I guess the big takeaway from that is like the DNA of the product, right? At the end of the day, even the upcoming founders, they need to think who is their customer is going to be and what is their workflow looks like. They cannot build like one fit for solution for US, India, everyone at same time, maybe. Um, Thank you so much, Ari. That really makes sense. Cool. I guess I'm gonna have one more question uh, before we give a kind of a closing remarks and any final opening to the audience. Um, Tell us like if someone are interested in fundraising, what is a typical approach looks like for brick and mortars for Alcha? Tell us the story like how Sonar came to your radar. Wow, Sonar and radar. But yeah. Um,
So, I mean, Sonar, I just met the guys at like different events and they were very persistent. And I think we had the construction technology day, so they came in through that as well. So I think um, so Formwork Labs, again, every VC is unique. Zakua, Fundamental, there is, Shadow Venture. There's a lot of VCs. So I can't speak for all of them. I think brick and mortar, like because of the check size that brick and mortar writes, I think traction is a very important metric to even start the process of due diligence, right? So decent amount of revenue or decent amount of usage or customers. Like I think that will be like a lot of times I see, especially construction tech startups in India that approach, like they have good ideas, but the traction is like they're a little early, especially for us. So like if you have good traction, good revenue, or good usage or good number of customers, I think the best way to like I think pretty universally, I can say like VCs either look for those three things, right? Even if you're early stage, you're looking for the team and technology. If you're slightly late stage, you're looking for team, technology, and traction. So if you want to approach brick and mortar, like if you have those three check boxes, right? Like team, traction, and technology, and traction being like more the operative word, definitely sort of share that saying like this is what we are building, this is the traction we have, and we're looking for funding. Um, Especially for brick and mortar. I can't speak for others, but that is the that's how you would approach a brick and mortar.
Gotcha. I mean, one thing I would like to highlight from your response is like the persistence, right? So there are a lot of times the founders like s- most of the times they try for a few days, few weeks, and they kind of feel down, almost like a depression. What do you take like, like for a founder who is starting his fundraising journey, like how much time it takes on average at this point in 2025 for according to your insights? Hmm.
I mean, so I will like, the first thing that you said, right? Like Jensen Huang has this very like I watch it podcast a lot, but he's the NVIDIA founder and CEO. He says that he always wishes pain and suffering to all the founders because he's like, if you don't go through pain and suffering, you will never mature to be a great like be successful at anything. So I would say that fundraising, it is a difficult journey for any founder. But I think like I think of fundraising in a different way. Like you should if you have built a good product or a good technology and you have good traction, fundraising will be easier for you than if you're raising money to figure things out. Like that just if you're a pre-seed founder, it's harder. If you've already raised like a seed and you have good traction, it's easier. I don't think there is a number that I can give you that it can take. Like I have seen companies get invested. An Indian company. I won't name the company, but they do really well. They were bootstrapped. They really hit it out of the park in traction, and they are getting investments one after the other. So I think for them it was a very short cycle. It can boil down to 2 or 3 months, and I'm saying end to end, huh? Like when you pitch to getting the
Yeah.
funds, and it can even extend out like 6 9 months. So I don't think there's a general range I can give you, but I think the way I would think about VC is like don't raise like VCs will invest if you have built something which is interesting and you're trying to tap into an area which is interesting. So I would say focusing on that is more
Mhm.
like rather than, I think there is a general like and this is my personal opinion, but I think I see founders celebrate fundraise. Like I think they should not celebrate the fundraise. Like you're raising money as a means to an end to go somewhere else, and I think you should celebrate where the milestones of revenue and customers more. So like I know there's this thing about like, oh, I raised money from VC. Like sure, like but you need to prove it out. So I would say raise money when you really need to and have a purpose for it. And I think then fundraising will be easier for you.
Yeah, 100%.
And the last
Fundraising.
thing, right, like, sorry, Ram, I'll say about this industry is of all the other industries, it's the most slowest moving, or if not the most, it's probably one of the top three slowest moving industries. Like, even if you have like the right connects, you have the right intros, you have the right pilots, it just takes a long time to convert sales. It takes like I always recommend like starters, right? Instead of the salesperson, the person you should hire before the salesperson is a customer success person, right? Like because that customer success will go and make sure that your product is implemented the right way. But you do need a lot of patience, lot of persistence. There will be a lot of times you'll be like, what the hell am I doing? It's taking so long. Everyone says they're interested, but they just don't convert. Even with the best of contacts, the best of introduction, it's just going to take time. It's a very slow moving industry. So that's just like a general thing I have observed. Like personally, I look at from like other founders and other companies, even with big marketing budgets and sales team, the revenue just does not move as quickly as you want to.
100%. I can't agree more. I mean, you need to be a different DNA to be in this industry. It's a very tough industry. If not, I mean, sales cycle is a tough. Building a product that can be sold because every customer company needs different. They ask customization. There's a lot of onboarding, training, support. It's insane kind of a complexity that they found I need to navigate. And hope and persistence is something should be part of their um, day to day. So yeah,
Yeah.
any questions from the audience? I mean, I saw a lot of in the chat, but feel free to speak up now. Um, before we request the Aditya to give a closing remarks and some kind of a valuable, closing knowledge for the uh, whoever listening to this podcast.
I have a question.
Yeah, Vijay.
As an investor, now that you've actually taken out the cat from out of the bag by saying the sales cycles are pretty long, so so will be for the investors, right, to pull your money out. What brings you to Contech when there are other industries which are far more easier and industries with shorter sales cycles? So we are talking a lot of healthcare. We are talking of a lot of organic, stuff coming in, sustainable products, not construction tech, but outside of that, food industry maybe. So what brings you to Contech now?
I mean, that's more of like a passion and an experience thing. Like I think, me personally, like last 7, 8 years, I've been in construction. I just like it. Like I think I said a lot of things about like long sales cycle and other things, but the other flip side is it's an industry like they say that roti, kapda, and makan. So the makan thing is never going to go over. So there's always going
Hmm.
to be construction. It's an evergreen industry. That will always be there. It's slow moving, which is kind of nice also in some areas because like DeepSeek just unsettled ChatGPT. It's a very cutting edge technology, and another cutting edge technology came in and kind of changed it. I think construction, in that sense, is slightly slower moving, so it gives you a little more time. And I think, especially on the brick and mortar side and all the other VCs in the construction tech space, I think they want to make an impact in this space. It's seen historically less investment from VCs, so I think it comes out of like passion for the space. I think a desire to see the space, improve productivity, get new technology. So I think it's just a focus area too, right? Like the contact VCs that you see, they started that way. The folks who started it typically come from construction backgrounds. The people they attract are all from construction and tech. So I think it's more of a niche play, and I think all the VCs, including people in this group, like we are here because we just like construction. Like even all
Right.
the hard things aside, it is a space we want to be because there's something about it. Like I think for me, right, like one thing pretty cool is like I've been in software products a lot, like but sometimes when you're doing construction, the thing of seeing that physical thing that you contributed to, there's a different kind of fulfillment, I would say, compared to others. So I would say just a segment that brick and mortar found, and they attracted people who are passionate about the industry.
So can we say it is not always all about money for the VCs?
I would not say that. I would say the return ratio is profile is very different. Like I think even in this
Yeah,
space, people are looking at it, but it's not the same. So even the fund size, right? Like if you look at most VCs in the space, like the fund size tends to be smaller. Because if a VC is raising 50 million, 20 million, 100 million, you're trying to return at least 3 to 4 times that. That's why I think it's going to be very rare for not anytime soon where a VC will raise like $1 billion fund for construction tech, which means if you raise $1 billion fund, you have to return at least $3 billion, $4 billion. That like it kind of gives you an idea of like what returns are expected, and that's the amount of flowing in. Like if you see Andreessen and Sequoia and others, like and SoftBank Vision Fund, right? They have 100 billion funds. So when you're raising a 100 billion fund, you're telling your investor, I'm going to return at least 300 billion. So I think those things are not going to happen in specifically Contech anytime soon.
thanks.
Naman, do you have any question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the interesting session. I think it was very insightful. I just have one question. I think you mentioned that it doesn't really work well for the pre-seed funding and all. Like, can you emphasize on how does it usually work in pre-seed funding when it comes to brick and mortar? Like, let's just talk about a software company in particular that is focused on developing design solutions, automating design solutions, and then moving forward with all the logistics part and connections. Like, what are your opinion?
So when I say it doesn't work, I mean that every VC will have a phase of the startup where they want to fit in, right? Like you do have a lot of like pre-seed funds, you have angel investors, even you have some VCs who will write small checks, right? It could be anywhere between 100,000, 300,000, all the way to up to 1 million. So when I say brick and mortar, like it doesn't work. What I mean is like the area where we come in is slightly later stage. So it really doesn't matter what your product or software is. Like if you have good traction, good revenue numbers, and you have a team built up, brick and mortar will definitely be interested. I think it depends on what kind of VC you're like. I'll say right, like if you see a VC firm who's raised $20 million, for example, that's their fund size, they would typically write smaller checks, which means they would come in slightly earlier. So it really depends. Like just because it doesn't fit into the brick and mortar wheelhouse doesn't mean it's not investable. It doesn't fit into the stage of growth that your company is at.
Gotcha. Uh,
Got it.
Chetan, yeah. Thank you, Aditya. I know it's over the time. Maybe we'll close in next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Aditya, thanks for the session. Really great listening to all the insights. Pretty hands-on. So I have a question more focused on Indian context or Indian industry in general. So have you had conversations with actual industry stakeholders, in the space? What kind of segments have you touched? Is it only the tier ones like the Tatas and the L&Ts, or have you had a chance to interact with level 2, level 3 kind of construction companies? And what do you see? Because construction typically assumes innovation as an overhead, right? Because it does
Yeah.
not technically generate revenue for them. I mean, it could get ROI, which is something on a longer term. And because a project life cycle is 2 years or plus, it takes time to see that ROI. So what's your experience been? I mean, what kind of customers you have spoken to or industry stakeholders, and what's your experience been talking to them in terms of, are they looking to adopt technology, or is it something that they're still not on their plate? They're just focusing on completing their work.
Yeah, I mean, to be transparent, like I've mostly interacted with the larger builders so far that have come through. And I think even because the larger builders kind of give you an initial idea of like what is the willingness to spend, and more than willingness, like where are they actually spending money? So I do think like larger builders, they are like I've heard they have a project management solution. For example, like either they are like they would prefer it to be homegrown or some custom solution because it tends to be cheaper, or some of them have adopted, you know, Autodesk or some other products. I think that's where they're spending. BIM, I think it's a mixed bag, like even Revit. Like I think there are some builders and even larger companies who kind of believe in it and they are going full steam ahead. And others are still trying to figure out like, is there true value? Because I think like again, right, like the Indian dynamic, like one of the builders I met is like, there is no real time pressure. Like we can, maneuver the length of project. It's
Yeah.
literally based on how we are selling or whatever. Like it's a very different structure in India compared to the like US. They want to get the thing out like they want to build the product or the project as quickly as possible because of the cost pressure of the labor. Like if you have to have them idle, it just
Mhm.
balloons up very, very quickly. And I think what I've heard from Indian developers is like the time doesn't matter. There's not too much pressure on time, right? Like I
Mhm.
think because of the buying cycle and the cost of labor and others. What I definitely like I've seen from Indian companies that have come up is like there is this impression that because India has a huge population, labor should be available. Like a lot of builders say that still they don't have skilled labor available. So I think, in the Indian context, anyone trying to tackle the skill labor issue is definitely interesting. And I think for tier two, tier three, like I've mostly looked at startups which are doing well. So Brick and Bolt, right? It's a pretty amazing company. And I think what that team has done is they've basically like flipped the model on its head and gone after the tier three buyer of tier one cities, and they've assured quality. So I think I see those kind of models being extremely successful for tier two, tier three, because I think when you go to tier two, tier three, like what are the problems that exist? Like the skill labor or like quality will always be a problem, not in terms of just craftsmanship, but quality of materials. You really don't get economies of scale. Logistics is going to be a problem. So I do think like there are innovations to be built around the tier two, tier three, which I think will be very hard for the big builders to go. So that's my early kind of thoughts. Again, I'm still fairly new to the system ecosystem, and especially tier two, tier three. I'm still learning. So that's my initial read. There was a second part, right, Chaitanya, to your question?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's a push that needs to be done. So I work as a consultant in this space. So when you talk to people, there are a lot of pushbacks on what happens. What's the value for me? Why do I pay X amount? I can hire two civil engineers who will do the job which you are trying to do with your solution. So that's
Yeah.
there. Trying to sell that idea that okay, this leapfrogs you into the next decade of your company, not the next project, but the next decade. That's been a hard sell for what we, at least my experience has been. So that's what I was trying to understand. Like, do you encounter similar conversations with
I think
these?
I think India now it's very like I mean I'm including all of us in this conversation. Like we're very value sensitive, right?
Yeah.
So it's always going to be like services is not that robust as an industry. Like I think in West it's a lot more robust. People understand the services models. Like people have built expertise there, and people are willing to pay for expertise. I think India will like it'll grow. It'll go slowly, but the model that I've seen that work, right? What Brick and Bolt is doing, there's another company, Yellow Sky, based out of Pune. And I think, again, I feel like in India, if you sell an outcome, you have a far better probability of success in terms of trying to say that, hey, I will actually fix this problem for you and then give you this outcome. I think there will be more appetite. I'm saying more as in comparatively more. I think still going to be hard to sell that. But I think if you can sell like, hey, like what a Yellow Sky, what I like about them is like they're not selling drones, they're not selling a software solution. They're like, we will do the whole thing. Like we will give you reports and we will scan the area, we'll put it in our platform, and then you don't have to even look at the platform. We will give you reports. And I think that will be like, see, every industry that has to go through a cycle. There was an interesting article I was reading, right? For India to mature in technology, like just as an ecosystem, what does it need? Like, you needed the Infosys to build the strength of technology. Then Infosys kind of helped build like these next generation startups, like, the Flipkarts and others. And Flipkarts and all helped build like Zerodha and Zetwork and our business. And I think like this will help build the next wave. So I think it's coming, where it just has to go through its cycle. And I think the market just has to mature, and it'll be a slow maturity that'll happen.
Awesome. Thanks for the insights.
Thank you so much, Aditya. I think we already, I mean, thank you first of all, even it's over the time, you patiently responding. As a closing remarks, I want you to touch base on two things. Why brick and mortars? Like if someone want a startup is like interested, there are general VCs, so many players, right? Why brick and mortars? And two, what is the wisdom you want to share with the founders for 2025?
Sure. So first, like brick and mortar, I think it's looking at like the spaces is robotics, software, materials, and I think if you're looking, especially like where brick and mortar can add a lot of value is if you're looking as an access point to like not just the money, right? Like I think for all VCs, we're trying to figure out what additional we can value. So if you're building software, if you're building for the West, I think it can provide a platform and introductions. That's what even I'm trying to build even in India. Like if not just the money piece, but can I help or can Brick and Mortar help you provide introductions? So if you're in the stage where you have close to proving out product market fit, if you have traction, if you have revenue, and you kind of need like gasoline to be poured, I think brick and mortar is definitely would be interesting to take a look at. The second question in terms of wisdom, like I hope I don't have any wisdom because I'm not that old right now. And I think the for the founders, I would say like, it's it's going to be slow, it's going to be painful. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening with like AI. So now I think what DeepSeek has proved is it's completely changed. At least my mindset is like, AI is going to be commoditized. So I think startups who can figure out how to leverage that as a wrapper on the solution that you're providing, that's definitely going to be a theme. Outcomes is going to be a big theme. Like you're seeing even the biggest of VCs like Axel talk about it, right? Outcome as a service. Like what is the outcome you're providing using technology? So focusing on outcomes would be definitely. And I think, yeah, it's a long haul. Like construction is just slow. So we're all here, including me, because we like the industry. So just have patience and persistence. So I think that's not wisdom, I'll say that's just my opinion. And I think I try to accept that too and then move forward.
Thank you so much, Aditya. That's such a valuable words. Thank you, Aditya. We appreciate you joining us in such a short notice and sharing all your. I know you won't you don't want to use the word wisdom. I'm still going to use wisdom insights. And thanks all the one who joined this call and listen to us, ask the questions, and making such an interactive and insightful discussion. If you want to reach out to us, our email ID, contact@seed-tribe. Please reach out to us. And if you have any recommendations on, hey, I need this speaker in the next series, do let us know. We always like to listen from you guys and try to make sure that we bring them on board. Thank you so much. Have a good day, guys.